Chapter 50 of A Firm of Girdlestone by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Ashton Hoffman. Winds up the threads and ties two knots at the end. Great was the excitement of the worthy couple at Fillmore Gordon's when Kate Hodson was brought back to them. Good Mrs. Dimmesdale pressed her to her ample bosom and kissed her, and scolded her, and wept over her, while the doctor was so moved that it was only by assuming an expression of portentous severity, and by bellowing and stamping about, that he was able to keep himself in decent control. "And you really thought we had forgotten you because we were insane enough to stop writing at that villain's request," he said, patting Kate's small cheeks tenderly and kissing her. "I was very foolish," she said, blushing prettily and rearranging her hair, which had been somewhat tumbled by her numerous caresses. "Oh, that scoundrel, that pair of scoundrels," roared the doctor, shaking his fist and dancing about on the hearthrug. "Pray God they may catch him before the trial comes off." The good physician's prayers was not answered in this case, for Bert was the only criminal who appeared on the dock. Our friends at all went down to the Winchester Assizes to give evidence, and the Navy was duly convicted of the death of Rebecca Tailforth and condemned to death. He was executed some 3 weeks afterwards, dying as he had lived, stolid and unrepenting. There is a little unpretending church not far from Fillmore Gordon's, in which a little unpretending clergyman preaches every Saturday out of a very shabby pulpit. It lies in Castle Lane, which is a narrow byway, and the great crowd of churchgoers ebbs and flows within 100 yards of it, but none who know of its existence, for it has never risen to the dignity of a spire, and the bell is so very diminutive that the average muffin man produces quite as much noise. Hence, with the exception of some few families who have chanced to find their way there, and have been so pleased with their spiritual welcome that they have returned, there is a poor and fluctuating congregation. So scanty is it that the struggling incumbent could very well weep when he has spent the week in polishing and strengthening his sermon, and then finds upon a Sunday how very scanty is the audience to whom it is to be addressed. Imagine, then, this good man's surprise when asked to publish the banns of a marriage of two couples simultaneously, each of whom he knew to be in the upper circles of life, and when informed at the same time that the said marriages were actually to be celebrated under his own auspices and in his own church. In the fullness of his heart, he at once bought a most unwearable black bonnet with lilac flowers and red berries, which he brought in triumph to his wife, who, good woman, affected extreme delight, and afterwards cut away all the obnoxious finery and replaced it to her own taste. The scanty congregation was no less surprised when they heard that Toby's Clutterbuck, bachelor, was about to marry Lavinia Scully, widow, and that Thomas Dimmesdale, bachelor, was to do as much to Catherine Hodson, spinster. They communicated the tidings to their friends, and the result was a great advertisement to the little church, so that the incumbent preached his favorite sermon upon barren fig trees to a crowded audience, and received such a ovatory as had never entered into his wildest dreams. And if this was an advertisement to the Castle Lane Church, how much more so was it when the very pompous carriages came rolling up with their very pompous drivers, all of whom being married men, and a depreciatory and wearing expression upon their faces to show that they had done it all before, and that it was nothing new to them. Now, out of the one carriage there jumped a very jaunty gentleman, somewhat past the middle age, and a little inclined to stoutness, but looking very healthy and rosy nevertheless. Beside him there walked a tall, tawny-bearded man, who glanced solicitously every now and again at his companion, as though he were the bottle holder at a prize fight, and feared that his man might collapse at a moment's notice. From a second carriage there emerged the athletic, brown-faced young fellow, accompanied by a small, weazened gentleman in spotless attire, who was in such a state of nervousness that he dropped his lavender glove twice on his way up the aisle. These gentlemen grouped themselves at the end of the church, conversing in low whispers and looking excitedly uncomfortably, as is the prerogative of the sterner sex under such circumstances. Mr. Gilray, who was Tom's best man, was introduced to Herr von Boomser, and every one was very affable and nervous. Now there comes a rustling of drapery, and every one turns their heads as the brides sweep up to the altar. Here is Mrs. Scully, looking quite as charming as she did 15 years ago on the last occasion when she performed the ceremony. She was dressed in a French grey gown with bonnet to match, and the neatest little bonnet in the world, for which the Major had ransacked Covent Gardens. Behind her came Bonnie Kate, a very vision of loveliness, in her fairy-like lace and beautiful ivory satin. Her dark lashes drooped over her violet eyes, and a slight flush tinged her cheeks. But she glided steadily into her place and did her share in the responses when the earnest little clergyman appeared upon the scene. There was Dr. Dimmesdale, too, with the brightest of smiles and snubbiest of waistcoats, giving away the brides in the most open-handed fashion. His wife, too, was by his side in tears and purple velvet, and many other friends and relations, including the two socialists who came at the Major's invitation, and beamed on everyone out of a side pew. Then there was a signing of the registers, and such a kissing and weeping and distributing of fees as never was seen in Castle Lane Church before. And Mrs. Dimmesdale, as one of the witnesses, would insist upon writing her name in the space reserved for the bride, in which there were many small jokes passed and much laughter. Then the wheezy old organ struck up Mendelssohn's Wedding March, and the Major puffed out his chest and stamped down the aisle with his bride, while Tom followed with his, looking round with pride and happy eyes. The carriage rolled up. There was a slamming of doors and a cracking of whips, and two more couples had started hand in hand down the long road of life which leads, who shall say whither? The breakfast was at Fillmore Gardens, and a very glorious breakfast it was. Those who were present still talked of the manner in which the health of the brides was proposed by Dr. Dimmesdale, and of the enthusiasm with which the toast was received by the company, also of the flowery address in which the Major returned thanks for the said toast, and the manly demeanour of the young man. As he followed suit, they speak too of many other pleasant things said and done upon the occasion. How von Boomser proposed the health of the little incumbent, and the little incumbent that of Dr. Dimmesdale, and the doctor drank to the unpronounceable Russian, who, being unable to reply, sang revolutionary song which no one could understand. Very happy and very hearty was everyone by the time that the hour came at which the carriages were ordered, when amid a pattering of rice and a chorus of heartfelt good wishes, the happy couple drove off upon their travels. The liabilities of the firm of Girdlestone proved to be less serious than it was at first imagined. After the catastrophe which had befallen the founder of the business, there was almost a panic in Fenchurch Street. But an examination proved that though the books had been deliberately falsified for some time, yet trade had been so brisk of late that with a little help the firm could continue to exist. Dimmesdale threw all his money and his energy into the matter, and took Gilray into partnership, which proved to be an excellent thing for both of them. The firm of Dimmesdale and Gilray is now among the most successful and popular of all the English firms connected with the African trade. Of the captains, there is none upon whom they place greater reliance than upon Macpherson, whose boat was providently saved from the danger which destroyed the former captain and his employer. What became of Ezra Girdlestone was never known. Some years after, Tom heard from a commercial traveler of a melancholy broken man who haunted the low betting houses of San Francisco, and who met his death eventually in some drunken phrase. There was much about the desperado which tallied with the description of the young Girdlestone, but nothing certain was ever known about the matter. And now I must bid adieu to the shadowy company with which I have walked so long. I see them going on down the vista of the future, gathering wisdom and happiness as they go. There is the Major, as stubby-toed and pigeon-breasted as ever, broken from many of his bohemian ways, but still full of anecdote and of kindness. There is his henchman, von Boomser, too, who is a constant dinner at his hospitable board, and who conveys so many sweets and to a young Clutterbuck who has made his appearance that one might suspect him of receiving a commission from the family doctor. Mrs. Clutterbuck, as buxom and pleasant as ever, makes no efforts at stopping these contraband supplies, but the wily Teuton still manages to smuggle them through in the face of every obstacle. I see Kate and her husband chastened by the many troubles and making the road to the grave pleasant to the good old couple who are so proud of their son. All these I watch as they pass away into the dim coming time, and I know as I shut the book that whatever may be in store for us there, they at least can never in the internal justice of things come aught but good. End of chapter 50. End of The Firm of Girdlestone by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Read by Ashton Hoffman, May 13th, 2024.